SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network Link 158. I'm your host this week, Spencer Presley, and I'm doing a one-man show for this Valentine's Day weekend. So, instead of having a specific kind of theme, this is going to basically be half news, half feedback, and after everything is all said and done, going to probably go on a review/rant about what I thought of the Sonic movie, and that's going to be the episode, just because it's me. My plans kind of fell through in terms of who I wanted to have on and what's going to happen, so hopefully you guys don't mind a little bit of a quicker episode. So, first off, I want to start with some news, and we have a really interesting little variety of news this week. I only picked a couple of things out. So, the first one is more of a PSA. We talked about it on last week's podcast, is almost happening, but if you were not aware, the Persona 5 Scramble demo is out on the Japanese PlayStation Store as well as the Nintendo Switch eShop. So, obviously, you have to have a Japanese account for both, but if you can look up how to do those, pretty easy. It's way easier to do on Switch, but if you have a PlayStation, I highly recommend checking out the PlayStation 4 version more. If you would like to check out footage of the game, I actually streamed through the whole thing on my YouTube channel, as well as did an impressions video. I'll link that in the description or in the show notes if you wanted to check that out. So yeah, if you would like to check out the demo, that is where you can find that out. Without kind of repeating myself / hoping people will check out the video and whatnot, I really liked it as a Warriors fan and as a big Persona fan. It is really interesting how they meld those two gameplay sessions together, and it doesn't really feel like it's one trying to be the other, and instead they find a really interesting middle ground. In terms of performance, because I know a lot of people are curious, because a lot of people want to play it portably on Switch, but they want to know what they're losing compared to PlayStation. So PlayStation is going to run twice as well, looks a lot better. Obviously the Switch is only running at 720p on a good day. Really struggles for 30 frames per second. Like I said, the demos are free. They're not timed or anything. Obviously, unless you're planning on importing this, you're in no huge hurry. For those of you who might be interested, though, I am importing a copy of this for the PlayStation 4. I should have it hopefully before March. And my goal is basically to... So as of right now, I am probably an hour or so away from beating Tokyo Mirage Sessions. That took a little longer than I wanted to, but I didn't really want to rush it. I mean, the game... It's such like a weird edge case for games in the terms of we're not going to get a sequel to it anytime soon. It's not like there's going to be DLC. I didn't really want to just like, all right, once it's out, bam, get it out. Let me know what you guys think. Like I've been really taking my time going over all the requests, side missions, basically just experiencing this game as freshly as possible so I can give you guys hopefully the best review possible. Obviously not in the sense of, hey, if you want to buy it, buy it. Like the game's been out. If you wanted to know if you were interested in buying it, go for it. This is more just in terms of a for me thing, in terms of I would like to make the best review I can possible to give this game a very fair and honest discussion and critique of it, because I feel like this game is really easy to throw under the bus without ever actually getting into the meat and potatoes of what makes it so good and so unique. So after I get my Tokyo Mirage Sessions Encore review out, the plan is to import and play Scramble, get that review up. I think, because reviews are already out with Famitsu, reports are saying the game's campaign is going to take about 25 to 40 hours. So obviously it's going to kind of depend on how much side stuff you want to do, or without even really getting into other modes. So hard to say, but for a Warriors game, it's a lot harder to kind of get really stuck. So that's when I can feel pretty confident in knowing, like, if I get on a weekend, I can probably knock a review out a week later as opposed to a much longer RPG. So after I review Scramble, I'm assuming I will hopefully have preview code for Persona 5 Royal at that point. If not, I'll wait for an basically be playing it along with the rest of you guys. So far, I have no idea really when Royal is planning on dropping. I know the game's code is done. They had a big preview event for a bunch of voice actors and stuff back in LA as well as Europe. But if I had to guess, going off of what Persona 5 was like, I'd say at the end of February, if not early March, the latest, is when review codes are going to start going out. And preview coverage from the event I mentioned earlier is happening... Oh, why am I blanking on it? No, yeah, this is like the most Atlas West move ever. Preview coverage for Royal drops the same day Persona 5 Strikers comes out in Japan. So I guess if you're covering both like me, you're just going to be up to your knees in content. Kind of weird, obviously, because as most people know, Persona 5 Scramble / Strikers isn't even officially announced in the West, even though it is being worked on currently and is being localized. So they're kind of in a weird spot, and I get it. Like, the game comes out in Japan, like, they basically, by the time Strikers comes out, America will be 2 Persona games behind, which is very rare for us. But this actually will lead us into our next news story. Actually, before I say that, just a quick heads up, because PlayStation kind of this is not really that big of a deal, but in case anyone is curious and going, PAX... let me see, Boston. PAX East is happening at the end of February, and at the PlayStation booth, PlayStation is going to have a demo that is more than likely the same one that was at the preview event for Persona 5 Royal. So if you are going to PAX and would like to check out the game about a month or so before it is out, and you're going to PAX East, be on the lookout. Atlus and Sega, I at least know Atlus isn't going to have an official booth. Sega might, but so far as of right now, the PlayStation booth at PAX East is going to be the only place to publicly play Royal before it is officially out, outside of preview events. Rambling aside, events and stuff aside, our first big news story is Persona 5 Scramble actually has a release date for the Chinese and Korean version. So obviously it comes out in February 20th, which is the week, by the time you guys are listening to this, about 4 days or less before the Japanese release, because that comes out on 2/20/2020. The other Asian release is going to be June 18th, 2020. And normally this would not be that big of a news story, but obviously with the demo dropping, the Japanese release so imminent, people are really excited for this game, almost more so than Royal, I've noticed. And people are really frothing, like, when are we going to get this game in North America or the West for everyone else in Europe? So, tinfoil hat time. Basically just because I want to tell people where I'm coming from / give them some hope. This news has pretty much confirmed to me that unless something crazy happens or Atlus is really, really, really dropping the ball, Persona 5 Strikers, as it'll be known in the West, is going to be releasing hopefully in July, which would be perfect because the game actually takes place in July and is a summer like road trip kind of game in terms of the setting. And the reason I come to this is because if you look, the game releases in Japan in February, in the rest of Asia in June, and a month later would be the Western release. Another game that we can look this up with is Persona 5 Royal. Came out in October in Japan. Comes out actually February 20th in the rest of Asia, and now in March for the rest of the world in the West. So kind of going by that math in terms of the localization departments, in terms of size, I can almost guarantee you all of the localizing and voice recording for Royal is going to be bigger than whatever Strikers is. That actually being said, that actually might not be fair. Strikers, especially after playing the demo, seems to have a ton of story, but we don't really know like how much of like that is all voiced. We've only really seen the opening beginning segments. So we know Strikers is going to be a very story heavy game, but we don't really know how to compare that to all of the new stuff in Royal. So basically this news story is if you're waiting for a Chinese and Korean version, comes out in June 18th, 2020. Get very excited. Everyone else in America, expect to get this, expect to get your hands on this in July. Please, Atlus, if somebody's listening to this, don't drop the ball on this. I know you guys can make this game happen in July. This would be such a perfect game. Very, very, very few big games kind of come out in the middle of the summer or right before new consoles. You don't want to release, like, August is pushing it. September, you're killing yourself. Everything else is going to be closer to PS5 and Xbox's new console. You don't even want to really get near that with a 10-foot pole. So July is what I am going to will into existence. Our next news story is probably a bigger deal than I'm making it. Just before I started recording, people have started noticing that Catherine Full Body was actually rated by the South Korean Games Board. And if anyone has followed the games industry, once something is like rated by a board, that doesn't mean a release is necessarily imminent. Also, I just realized I probably didn't say the Switch. Catherine Full Body was rated for the Switch in the Korean Games Rating Board. So this basically confirms it. This doesn't mean it's not going to happen. This doesn't mean it's happening in like a month. This means it's happening. Atlas can't really just do this as like a, oh, hey, maybe. The ESRB is a bit of a weird one because I know games kind of get looped into ESRB ratings and don't always necessarily come out. I know Vita games have kind of gotten that treatment before, but with Switch, it's definitely not really the case. So all we really know right now is Catherine Full Body is definitely coming to the Switch at some point. If I had to guess, I would say this is probably like a fall game. I don't know, and I highly doubt Nintendo would get into marketing this very heavily, especially as this is a re-release of a already released game from, at this point, by the time it comes out, it'll be over a year. Because if people don't know, Catherine Full Body is already over a year old in Japan. It released on Valentine's Day 2019 for PS4 and Vita. So this, assuming there's nothing really crazy or kind of special about it, I'm assuming this will sort of, in terms of like hype and announcement, I can see Catherine Full Body on Switch sort of being like Sakura Wars, where Sakura Wars just kind of announced this week is coming on April. Announce it 2 months beforehand, you know it's a pretty niche series. Hopefully they do more for a pre-order bonus than just a sheet of stickers, but that's a whole other thing aside. So this is a weird one where I think a lot of people are making a big deal about like, oh, I've seen a lot of, oh my god, I'm so glad I waited, or, oh, this is going to be like the best version of the game. I'm in a really weird camp of this where Catherine has been re-released so much recently where after playing it on 2 different systems last year with PlayStation Vita first and then PlayStation 4 with the American version, and especially also with Catherine Classic just happening on PC, it just raises like some questions in terms of, okay, how are they going to handle the PC version? Is this also going to be dropping on PC and Switch at the same time? Is Catherine Classic just going to get updated with Full Body, which I highly, highly doubt because those are 2 very, very different games at their core. Little things like that. I doubt there's going to be any like big enhancements or things added to it. I know Catherine Full Body didn't necessarily sell crazily well. I'd say, honestly, I was surprised how well it sold in the West in terms of it actually charted on NPD's like top 20 for September. And Japan, I know it did okay, but didn't like blow anyone's socks off. But yeah, so this is a weird one because I know it's not going to have anything really crazy. The biggest thing they could probably do to it that would be a big selling point for me is obviously local multiplayer. You could play with, very easily, you could play Catherine with 1 Joy-Con, so splitting it up like that would be very, very fun for competitive play, but in terms of having a portable version, I'm in the weird camp of I still think the Vita version will be better at the end of the day than the Switch one, in terms of like, okay, well, it's a smaller system, blah, 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 like that. But for obviously the fact that Atlas West didn't bring over the Vita version for absolutely no reason outside of they probably just didn't view it financially viable, the Switch one will 100% also come out in America. This one really has no reason not to be a like day and date worldwide release. I'd be very surprised if not, just because obviously the localization is done and really all you're doing is porting over the PlayStation. Now that I bring that up, it'll be interesting in terms of what the visuals will look like. The PS Vita version is no slouch. I'd actually say it holds its own against PS3, but the PS4 definitely does have a lot of visual stuff you lose compared to the other versions of it. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where the Switch kind of lands, like whether it'll be closer to the Vita version in looks or whether it'll actually hold its own to the PS4 version. as I said, I'm not super duper excited about this. It is cool that it's happening. I know a lot of people are really, really wanting to play more games on Switch. They're really excited about Persona 5 Scramble happening on Switch. People love Tokyo Mirage Sessions on Switch. I know that was a big one for me, but obviously as that is a Nintendo exclusive game, and for the foreseeable future will be a Nintendo exclusive game. I can't really be like, oh, Tokyo Mirage Sessions would be better on PS4. I'm not really like kind of having that argument. It's more of a, okay, this is a port of an enhanced version. Like, okay. It's cool that it exists. I don't need to double dip. I highly, highly doubt I'll buy it unless it goes on sale for a while, because obviously the way games are now, like, unless you're super, super die hard, like ride or die for a series, or there's like a crazy special edition that's really unique and interesting, most games you can wait 2 or 3 months and you're going to save at least 20 to 30 bucks, and you're not really going to be missing out that much. That being said, if you guys have not played Catherine Full Body, only have a Switch, and are interested in it, please, please, please check it out. It is a really, really amazing game with some unique changes, but at the end of the day, I can definitely confirm it is the better version of Catherine at the end of the day. If you are holding out for this version and we're waiting for the Switch, please let me know. Like, tweet at us on Twitter at SMTNetwork, or like reply to this in the comments and whatnot. Like, I would be curious to know, like, what your kind of, not argument, but what do you think makes this a bigger deal? Maybe I'm missing something. I hope I am. It just kind of feels like the, like, Switch people out there, like, when you're asking for every game to come to Switch, and at the end of the day it just kind of comes and it's like, yeah, I knew it would. Like, this isn't a Persona 5. Like, when a Persona 5 is going to happen on the Switch, I think that'll be a bigger deal, because that is a game people were like dying and asking and breathing for. Like, people like were asking for Catherine on Switch, I'm sure, but people weren't like, it's almost like actually a joke. Like, in terms of like the Shin Megami Tensei community, there are people who are like, where's Persona 5 on Switch? And then there are people who are like, where's SMT5 news, obviously. I was having an interesting conversation about this with a couple other content creators, and they were like, oh, this is going to like get all the Persona 5 people on Switch really, really excited. And I was talking to someone, I was like, Persona 5 as the vanilla game, that'll probably never come to Switch. Because in terms of Atlus's like development timeline, like why would they port the basic version on Switch and not just wait for whatever exclusivity period that the Royal version has? Because obviously Royal is the bigger and better version of it. Presumably, obviously, I've not played through all of Royal and touched Royal at all, really. So vanilla P5, but I obviously know people want just the version of P5, but it is kind of interesting because I think people for the longest time have been like, hey, P5's on PS3, just put that version on Switch, because that's basically what they're going to look like. If not, the PS3 version may be a little bit sharper. But yeah, like I said, please let me know. It is interesting. I'm excited that Atlus is bringing more stuff over. Don't think, by the way, that this is any even relatively related to that survey recently that I didn't even want to cover, because a whole bunch of news sites were basically taking a Atlus Japan survey asking for what ports do you want, what remakes do you want, blah, 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 blah. Companies do this all the time. They do this every year. But for whatever reason this year, all the news sites were really taking this as Atlus is asking fans, do they want blah, blah, blah? Like, and this is going to make it happen. It's like, no, they do this every year. Like, yes, it has an effect on the company, but those surveys have such a minuscule effect that it's like, you can't look at Catherine Full Body coming on Switch as saying, oh, we won because we did the survey. So it was going to happen either way. They just want to know what customers think and what they want for the future, planning down the line, blah, 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 blah. That is that. Let me see here. That is really it for big news in terms of like console stuff. All right, so this week I would like to bring back a old part of the podcast that we've not done in very, very, very long time, called the Evoker of the Week. We obviously don't have any responses to a previous episode's Evoker, but I do have some user feedback to Sonic. But before we get into that, in case you are not a Sonic fan, I would like to say the Evoker of the Week is basically just a question we ask on a podcast, and then the next podcast we discuss what the what you all thought about it, blah, 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 blah. Basically just us having a very delayed conversation in podcast and text form. So the Evoker this week I'd like to ask everybody is, with Catherine Full Body coming on Switch, how do you feel about that? Do you plan on picking it up? And do you think this is going to have any real impact either in terms of sales or how the game is critically kind of viewed? Because honestly, I think you can kind of fairly assume that after it came out in a really busy time last September, unless you're like a hardcore fan or were already a fan of Catherine, most people probably forgot Full Body even did come out last year. It was just kind of a weird release timing year for everyone. So basically with that one, if you want to respond, just respond to this episode. It'll be included on the Twitter post, Facebook group, or you can just shoot us an email as well. We have an email. If you guys, if for whatever reason you guys did not know, we have an email. You can like send us questions. I've never advertised it, but if you are one of those people who listen to the show on iTunes and stuff online, don't want to post a comment on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, you can email us. Our email is smtnfaithful@gmail.com. You can send in a response, a question. I will include them because we very rarely get emails from listeners, but I would love for if you guys do want to email and don't want to have to make an account for a different social media, which I totally understand. All right, so that aside, that is the news. I'm talking to myself here. We've been doing this for like 23 minutes. That's not too bad. Let's kind of move into the least Atlas part of the podcast. But this was a really weird week, and not in a bad way. On Valentine's Day 2020, Sonic the Hedgehog had a movie come out. And on February 15th, the day after, I saw it in a large group setting. Saw it with my girlfriend and a couple of other local friends. And I cannot believe how much I loved this movie. Like many people out there who followed it last year, it's just still so weird to me, like, how much I liked this movie. Like, my brain can't really process it in the sense of, like, yeah, I really did like this. Like, it's not a perfect movie by any means, and we'll kind of get into it through the next however many minutes of me rambling. But it's just very interesting of, like, the trailer. Like, this movie had been in development for many, 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 many years. It was originally going to be published by Sony, and now it got published by Paramount. And had no interest. I guess for a little bit of context in terms of what kind of Sonic fan I am, obviously people know I'm a big Sega fan. I started with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Don't know why I said Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I guess actually, no, that is the title. Yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I just think of it as Sonic 3. So I started with Sonic 3 and some really crappy Genesis collection for PlayStation 2, I think. Not like the Sonic Mega collection. I think it was on one of those weird, like, really bad Sega Ages collections, but not the one that M2 did. There are just a lot of really weird Sega ports. So started with Sonic 3 in like the early 2000s. Eventually did get the Sonic Mega collection. Never super loved a lot of the 3D ones. Like, when I think of Sonic games I love, it's really weird. Big ones that stand out for me. I love Sonic Generations. I love Sonic CD, which was my favorite Sonic game for the longest time. I'm just now playing through Sonic Mania, and I can't believe that I waited like almost 3 years for it. But hey, to no one's surprise, Sonic Mania is a very, very good game. And a little weird one, but I always have to give it a shout out. Sonic and All-Star Racing's Transformed is so good. It is like easily one of the best kart racing games out there, and especially because I like to play it on the Vita, because I'm a big weirdo. The Vita version is super, super, super solid, but that thing is on like everything. I know Team Sonic Racing came out last year and had a lot of fans, but I think everyone agreed that losing the Sega touch of that made that game a lot less special. So that's a little bit of a history for it. I've played most of them. I would say, let me just go through. I'm going to do lightning round really quick before we do this, because we're talking about Sonic, and if you care about it, you'll be listening or turn out. So I have played, in no particular order, Sonic 1, 2, 3, Knuckles, Sonic Spinball, all on Genesis, and I've messed actually around with quite a few of the Game Gear versions. Anything on the Mega Collection, everything on the Gems Collection. I'm a weirdo and actually don't hate Sonic the Fighters, but I do know it is a trash game. Sonic Adventure 1 is fine and cool in terms of Dreamcast nostalgia. 2 is good for music and not too much else. I don't have a lot of nostalgia for 2. Sonic 06 is something I've actually thankfully avoided most of my life, besides crappy demos. Sonic Heroes has a jamming opening song, and that's about it. Let me see what else. Never played Sonic Unleashed, weirdly. Sonic Colors I only ever played on the DS, along with Sonic Rush and Sonic Adventure. Never played the advanced games. We're winding down here. Obviously played Generations, and I played the demo for Sonic Forces and thought, wow, this is the worst sequel to Sonic Generations ever. And that was kind of my Sonic history, not counting any of the like really, really weird spin-offs, but I did mention Sonic Fighters and Sonic Spinball, so that's a bit of an odd one. Oh, yeah, I guess actually in terms of weird shout-outs, shout out to the development and not the game for Sonic 3D Blast. Bad game, but technically very interesting. There is a guy, I forget his name, I think it's like Game Hut. I know he's like changed it recently. He was one of the developers of that game, and that had a very, very interesting legacy. Shout out as well to Sonic R. I love that game. I played it on a friend's PC back in the 90s, and to this day I still love every single song on that soundtrack. And I feel like there was one other weird one. Oh yeah, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine for getting me into Puyo Puyo without actually letting me know that was Puyo Puyo for many, many, many years. I just thought that was a really weird Sonic game. So, weird history aside, I would say I'm a pretty casual Sonic fan. I don't super love it in terms of it, but I definitely have nostalgia for it. I grew up with Sonic. But I am far from like a ride or die, caught all the shows, read all the comics. I'm just more aware of it. So, went into the first trailer in April 2019. Along with everyone else, I saw it and was like, woof, this is a dumpster fire that I will probably see on DVD, but I'm in no hurry to give this movie my money because, wow, this looks like a really, really, really bad take on this character who a lot of people hold in high regard. Like, obviously, as most people know, like Sonic has a crazy big fandom. That being said, when the delay happened, I thought, oh, that's cool. I'll be interested to see how it looks. When the new trailer came out, I think it was November of 2019 or so, like around there. When we saw the redesigned look, I was like, okay, I'm in. They listened, which is really rare nowadays, especially for Hollywood movies. They delayed it. They took the time they needed. Obviously, the animation studio who helped with the redesign, they all lost their jobs. It sucks, but at the end of the day, they worked really hard on the movie, and it really shows. Without kind of going into like too much, because I think there's going to be spoilers in terms of stuff I loved, but you either know if you want to see this or not. The reception, especially now that it's been out, is all the fans love it, way more than we had any thought to. Critics, I think it's like reviewing on like Rotten Tomatoes at like a high 60s. But like I said, if you are even like half a brain cell and you know what kind of, like when you hear Sonic the Hedgehog has a movie and you hear that fans aren't and you hear that the fans of Sonic love it, that's probably all you really need to know before going into it or not. I highly, highly recommend seeing it in a group setting if you can, because at the end of the day, it is a comedy. I actually don't think of this as a kids movie very much. Someone posted when I was asking in the Facebook group what people thought about it. They were like, oh, I'm a grown adult. I don't really want to go see a kids movie by myself. I don't really have anyone else to see it with. I will say, if you are worried about this being a very cringy kids movie, this has dumb, like, kid humor at points, but I think of this as just a Sonic movie. Like, it just felt like a movie for Sonic fans, whether they be young or old. Like, I never once was, like, sitting there like, wow, this is... I am too young to be here, and I've seen a lot of movies that I was definitely probably way too old to see in theaters as a grown adult by myself. So, without kind of getting too into the weeds, I'm not going to go like beat by beat about the story, just kind of very basic. I want to give really big shout outs to, obviously, how the redesign looks. The fact that they actually start the movie on Mobius, I think I'm saying that right, which is Sonic's planet. looks incredible. I wish we obviously could have spent more time there, but that's not what the kind of movie it is. But I will say, in terms of a Sonic the Hedgehog is on Earth, they do a really great job in terms of making sense. He gets sent there at a really young age. He spends about 10 years in isolation by himself in a super small town, basically absorbing everything through eavesdropping on people and pop culture, like comics, movies, and stuff. Makes sense for where he kind of gets his personality in a really good way. I cannot believe how much I liked Ben Schwartz as Sonic, which is just I'm not like, oh, I have like one specific Sonic in my head, but I've heard like Roger Clark Smith as him through, oh my god, I don't even remember when he started, but especially after all the episodes of the Sonic Boom cartoon and all the games he's done, like I'm so accustomed to Roger's voice as Sonic that I was really curious if like Ben would kind of sound out of place or weird. At no point it felt super supernatural. He definitely makes it his own Sonic, and I'm so excited to see, and I really hope that the fandom, kind of like when Generations came out, I would love for us to be like, I love movie Sonic, new Sonic, and like classic Sonic. So we have like chubby Sonic, taller, like limmy look. I don't know really how to describe, like basically like classic Sonic is kind of shorter and chubby, Adventure Sonic is a little leaner and longer limbs, and then Adventure Sonic kind of looks like a little bit of both, but obviously with the like more realistic looking quills. But yeah, like just I love how he interacts with the world. The human characters aren't super dumb and annoying. I know everyone's been talking about Jim Carrey, but I have to give a shout out to, don't let me forget him, James Marsden, who is so good at just being like Sonic's like buddy cop movie. Because like basically, if you don't know what this movie is, it is a buddy cop and a road trip movie in one, and it works really well. Like he for someone who has to act with nothing, because obviously James Marsden is a real person who had to act like in a car or in action scenes with a Sonic that is not there and is just like a pile of tennis balls or a creepy like wax figure. He does a really good job at selling like that he is there, and the jokes definitely hit way more than they miss. But I can't talk about Humans very much without going into Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, who just fucking steals it. Like, I'd say I'm a pretty average Jim Carrey fan. I'm not one of those people who, like, when I think of Jim Carrey as an actor, for whatever reason, my brain doesn't go to, like, Dumb and Dumber. Like, I've seen all of those movies he did in the 90s, but, like, I'm a weirdo. Like, in my head, when I think of Jim Carrey, I think of Yes Man, and I think of Eternal Spotlight. I think of, like, all the weird movies he's done. Like, I like Jim Carrey as a comedian, but I don't always think of, like, the roles people think of him as right away, like The Grinch or even Ace Ventura. Like, I don't hold any nostalgia for those movies, really, for the most part. But I cannot believe how well cast he was as Robotnik. I don't know who had blackmail, whether he saw the script and just thought, oh, I can do something really interesting, because this version of Robotnik is so interesting in terms of its like the origin stories for how this Robotnik becomes the one we really know from the games. Also, thank God that it's Dr. Robotnik, because it would be a lot harder for everyone to take it seriously if they was called Dr. Eggman the whole time. Obviously, there are like references with his drones looking like eggs and different things like that. But his character is just sold so well. He steals every single scene he's in, and the look is great. Like honestly, out of everything in this movie, I think people are going to start seeing a lot of movie Sonic Dr. Robotnik cosplay, because it's just such a unique look with like the 5 o'clock shadow, the super trimmed hair, the really weird like Neo Civil War curly mustache, but not that curly. He super kills the look. Like even like before you really see him in action, when he's on screen, he just kind of feels like a interesting take without not feeling like Dr. Robotnik. It's kind of hard to describe without really seeing it, and I'm really glad that the trailers don't like show all of his best parts, which definitely was a fear going into it. Shoutouts as well to really minor characters, because there's not actually that many people. This is a pretty low budget movie for everything considered, even with the redesign. I think it was a little over like $80 million. So shout out to Tom's wife, as well as her sister, totally stealing the show, and Agent Stone, who is Dr. Robotnik's assistant, and does not have a ton of scenes, but all those, like, all the side characters definitely add to the movie and make it feel like really, really fun. And just I just can't recommend this enough in terms of, like, man, it was so great to see a video game movie for a character I grew up with, and I care in terms of like a nostalgic way, but not in a, okay, if this movie sucks, my life is ruined. Like, if they made, like, and I know this is probably like 50,000 years away from happening, like, if a Persona movie came out, the likelihood of it being good is so small. I would not trust that to be good for, like, to make any sort of Persona style movie in 2 hours, especially from an American company. I would have zero faith in that, and still be disappointed at the end of the day that it was bad, because obviously you blew it at that point. But to see this work out, to see the redesign happen, to see how funny it is, to see how much the jokes hit. Like I said, the jokes hit way more than they miss. They don't feel like you're being talked down to. Just to give tiny little dumb spoilers, I cannot begin to say how much this movie felt like it was just catered to big dumb idiots like me. Like, I was the only person in my theater who laughed at the Fast and Furious joke, which I'm sure the only reason that was in there was because of, like, one of the producers was a producer on the first Fast and Furious film. But just, like, little dumb things that, like, of course Sonic the Hedgehog would be a fan of Fast and Furious because it has the word fast in it. That's such an easy joke. Like, you can make the dumb car joke movie, but the joke they do with Fast and Furious is at the movie's extent, at the Fast and Furious movies extents, because it's like, oh, they're not about cars, they're about family, which is, if you've seen that, of course they're all like big dumb car superhero movies, but at the plot of the Fast and Furious movies, it is about family. And it's like, I was telling my father this, who in a million years I could never get my father to see Sonic the Hedgehog, but when I told him this joke, he was like, oh, okay, that's a pretty good joke. And other dumb things, like even the product placement jokes, like they have 2 Olive Garden jokes. That should not work. The jokes about Olive Garden should not work at all. But when they literally, like, when you hear Tom say, when you're here, your family, I'm fucking spitting up, because I'm like, that's the dumb shit I would do. I would make fun of the fact that fucking Olive Garden is like, it's not a great restaurant, but it's like, they're the dumb thing of like, oh, we gotta go out for a classy date. We're going to Olive Garden, because when you're here, your family. And just stupid things like that. Sonic's references were really good. Little dumb things and Easter eggs I really, really appreciated. Like at the end when Sonic is basically having his power of friendship moment and beating Dr. Robotnik. The fact that he literally, at the end of the day, bops him on the ship 3 times and it explodes, just like the games. I'm like, this is just so perfect. I can't put it into words. Like, obviously, the movie, at the end of the day, is not a perfect movie. Like, in terms of I'm going in with a bunch of friends, I want to have fun, this was a perfect movie experience for me. I will gladly pick this up when it comes out on Blu-ray. I am very excited to see it again. Honestly, I'm at the point now where I enjoyed this so much, I want to now see if any of my friends who haven't seen it, I want to go with them and see it, just to see if it holds up again. But this is based off one viewing a day ago. After I saw it, I really, really, really wanted to know what the rest of you guys thought, so I asked on Twitter and I asked on the Facebook group. So we're going to end the show with what you guys thought about the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And our first response, this is a great one and a sad one, comes from the Velvet Network. The Velvet Network says, all the post-credit scenes were pretty great. Oh, yes, awesome point. Tails being in it. My whole theater exploded, and that made me feel very proud that everyone was equally excited to see Tails on the big screen with his actual voice actor, and that was super, super cool. So yes, Velvet Network says, all the post-credit scenes were pretty great. Jim Carrey nailed it. I love how this Sonic looks and moves. Sadly, in Latin America, the Sonic voice was dubbed by a famous YouTuber with no experience in voice acting, which is really depressing to hear. Moving over to Facebook, and on the Facebook group, we have from Marcos, who says, I took my little brother to see it and I liked it. The intro for Sega was fantastic, which, yes, interjecting really quick, the intro is a slow zoom out of classic Sega games and franchises, and I was very proud to to tell my girlfriend and John slash Gnarly, who I saw the movie with. I was like, look, it's Shenmue. I'll never see Shenmue on the big screen again, but look, for like 5 seconds you can see Shenmue on the big screen. Like, that was a really great way of saying, like, hey, obviously Sega had probably minimal involvement with this. I think they had a lot more after the redesign controversy last year, but just for the fact that, like, man, this is our first, like, real Sega movie, and it hit so hard, especially with fans, as you can tell by the reception, and by me fanboying out about it. It was one of those moments where I'm like, man, this is why I love, like, being, like, part of, like, being, like, nostalgic for, like, Sega, and, like, whether, like, I criticize certain aspects or not, at the end of the day, I love so many of their franchises. Like, I love Sonic, I love Golden Axe, I love Altered Beast, even though a lot of these do not hold up, but, like, I grew up with a lot of these games, even though I was born in 93 and had to experience a lot of Genesis games in the 2000s. Like, I still grew up with, like, so many of these classic franchises. Like, just seeing that logo hit so hard for me. Going back, though, to what Marco said. So after seeing the logo, Jim Carrey was great as Robotnik, along with Ben Schwartz as Sonic. The references and the post-credit scenes were great, too. Hopefully, it'll get a sequel. Oh, my God, I can't agree enough. This movie needs a sequel. The end, like, shot of Dr. Robotnik shaving his head in Mushroom Hill Zone is just the most, like, holy shit, get hyped. If they can make the sequel happen with, like, shave head Robotnik, crazy mustache, big mushroom gut, I am so in, and man, Jim Carrey better come back. Next response comes from Nick Strasser, who says, even though there was some slightly cringy meme humor, it was an excellent watch. And the best part are whenever Sonic and Robotnik interacted. Absolutely worth seeing. Leah, oh man, I'm going to ruin your last name. I am super sorry. Leah Moriolis said, watched it today, loved it too, great for kids and kids at heart. Could not agree more. Michael Friedel, I am, again, apology, very bad at last names. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It totally aims for children as the target audience, which is totally fine by itself, but it's inconsistent with some scenes following each other, and the quote-unquote surprises or turnarounds are mostly obvious for the mindful viewer. On the plus side, the animation was smooth, the story was interesting and fun, Jim Carrey being back in a comedic role was godlike, and the mid-credit scene raises my desire for part 2. Seeing it in German, English voiceover follows next week. I would be so curious to see who they got to do Dr. Robotnik in German. Next one comes from Robert Ramos, who said, I said, wow, I hate this to a lot of the moments, but I can't quite say it was a bad movie. Which, hey, for someone who said, wow, I hate this a lot, and still didn't say it was a bad movie, that's a pretty good testament. Gal Barbeo said, I forgive it just because it has the... Oh, serious. I forgive it just because I know the sequel can be much better, which is very, very good. Very, very good point. Sammy Van Bockhorst says, it was better than I expected it to be. Really expected the movie to suck way more than it ended up doing. I am a huge loyal Sonic fan since I was 4 years old, and this movie made my heart happy. That is a awesome review. Thank you so much. Also, Sammy says, the flossing was cringe. Yes, he does floss twice in the movie, and I think it's cringe, but then there's also part of me where I had to remind myself, in terms of age, Sonic is probably about 13, 14 years old, and let's be real, it's circa 2018, 2019 when this movie was getting written and whatnot. Yeah, 13, 14-year-olds floss. Ashley Hodges says, loved it, and our last terrible review comes from Marcus Brown. I cannot believe you're finishing the podcast with this final word. Chili dog. Chili dog, everybody. That was our Marcus's review. And he didn't actually see it, and has ruined the sanctity of Shin Megami Tensei Network for the last time. And that is why he will never be an admin. because I know he will not get this far in the podcast to hear me talking crap about him. So if anyone would like to talk crap about us or find us online or interact with us on Facebook like we just did in this episode, you can find our Facebook group by going to facebook.com/groups/SMTNetwork or just search Shin Megami Tensei Network. You can find us on Twitter. We are at SMTNetwork there. I myself, my personal account is at Torchwood4SP. You can find the YouTube channel I mentioned at the beginning of the show by searching Shin Megami Tensei Network or by searching my name, which is Spencer Presley. That being said, I don't have a guest to pimp. Did all the usual stuff. If you would like, please rate and review us on iTunes. I cannot express how much that helps. You guys did a really, really, really great job at promoting last week's show, talking about the Atlas 2019 year in review. I would super appreciate if we could keep that up, even just retweeting it or sharing it to a friend or just basically any way to get the word out, like checking it on YouTube or subscribing to the channel. Really, really, really means a lot to me. I love making this show for you guys, even if it is just me on a Sunday night talking into a corner of my room. It means a lot, and I love the fact that any of you guys are willing to listen and put up with it, let alone be a fan of it. So thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. I hope you liked the news. Let me know what you thought of this format. And yeah, hopefully I edited out all of the sections of me being out of breath and needing to get a swig of water. So have a good week, guys. See you next week.